Okay. So just thinking about your basic stance, feet hip width apart, toes pointing forwards, weight slightly forwards in your feet, exaggerating now, because then what we would do is we'll just drop back a little bit, come more to the upright position. It's really just a softening in your hips and in your knees at this point, to get that feeling of just sitting into your legs, to let some of the weight in the upper part of your body drain away. We give you this sort of freer quality in your movement. Just use an awareness of your posture. Use that attention to your posture, that attention to your movements as a way to help you develop your attention. You may need to just keep bringing it back if you're anything like me, but that's okay. That's part of the practice. And with that sense of attention is this idea of intention, an intention to stand like this, an intention to move like this. So as always, it's worth reframing in a way how we're approaching something like Tai Chi. If we think of it as simply a slow form of exercise, then it's not that we won't get any benefit out of it, it's just that we're not getting the most out of it. If we can start to think of it in terms of a moving meditation, of a practice that helps us to develop this quality of attention, developing into intention, then we begin to go a little bit deeper into the movements. You don't need to aim to exercise when it's a moving meditation, because it's a moving meditation. And the whole point about moving is that it's exercise in one form or another. So one of the principal qualities, I think, that we're trying to bring to our movement and our posture is that we're in harmony with the pull of gravity as it works through our body, rather than challenging it. And for that, we do need this awareness. You know, it's like a sailor doesn't navigate their boat through the weather and the currents of the sea by putting their headphones on for their favorite playlists from wherever they get their playlists from. They get it by knowing what's going on, by maybe sort of being aware of the forecast, being aware of the maps, whatever they do. And in the same way, just gradually developing if you like, a map of your body. What happens when you turn in your center? What happens to your ribs, your shoulders, your arms? And with an idea that we want to gradually build on that, gradually improve that. So hence the basic posture. If my weight is back in my heels, I'm at the point of kind of falling, and my body will pick that up very quickly and stiffen up and tighten up. If I'm too far forwards, the same thing will happen. If I'm just a little bit forwards here, I have the possibility of, again, this sense of sitting, just that dropping down of the hips, as though, you know, if you're out for a walk somewhere and you've just stopped and there's a fence nearby, and you just rest your bottom on the fence for a few moments. It's a simple enough idea, one that will take time to develop, because although it's a very slight movement, very slight change, it actually is one that affects the whole body. It's going to require different kind of engagement with muscles, tendons, ligaments, how they interact with our skeleton, for instance. Another intention, if you like, another change of intention perhaps, is to feel that we've got the support from that skeleton and the associated muscles, so that rather than feeling that we have to hold on tight, we're able to just let our body rest over that deeper, slightly more internalized structure. Think of a garment draped over a tailor's dummy, for instance. There's a shape within that gives shape to the garment, but the garment itself isn't sort of starched and stiff and hard as a rule. It's normally there, you can feel the material and so on and so forth. As always, these opening exercises are really good exercises for just reminding ourselves of these aspects of Tai Chi and these qualities that are possible in our body. Because slightly faster movements that we make really do, I think, highlight the looseness, the momentum, the flow, all of which come out of that sense of space within the body, within the spaces around our muscles, the spaces in the joints of the body, and so on and so forth. Spaces in the chest and the belly for breathing, for all sorts of internal processes. And then just raising your arms a little. And let your hands drop down. Shake it. It is, of course, quite a strong process. Just a very slight change of posture means that, as I said earlier, that you're engaging muscle, tendon, ligament, other support mechanisms in a very different way. So the fact that we're talking about spaciousness and movement and so on and so forth doesn't imply that it's not hard work. And the conditioning is not what we often think of as conditioning. You will probably find thigh muscles in particular starting to ache. Remember, when they get tired and they stiffen up, in a sense, you're no longer doing Tai Chi. So, you need to build this up gradually, but also, you'll see me do it quite often, shaking out and so on and so forth. So just to get a bit more detail here, when I bring my weight forward, I'm going to come closer actually, so you can see what my legs are doing. When I come forward, when I bring my weight forwards, you can see, roughly speaking, my knees are above the balls of my feet. And obviously, this slightly angled position will become quite uncomfortable after a while, even though it's quite a slight angle. And so here in lower back, hips and buttocks, there's this little bit of a drop back and a settling down. And you can see from here to here, notice how my head and shoulders come up. So this is the in a way the posture that we're aspiring to over a period of time. We want to be able to just settle down in this posture, whether we're doing Tai Chi or not, wherever we actually are. It allows our center of gravity to drop, and this is a key part of this. because our center of gravity dropping instantly makes us more stable. So, you know, a tree, when it grows up, doesn't rest on top of the earth, isn't balanced on top of the earth. It puts physical roots down into the ground. We don't do that. We can't physically root down, but we can get that sense of rooting down, as we would refer to it, with that intention to drop our center of gravity. So now, let your hips drop back a little bit more, and then chin up and dropping back again. When I say push up, we're pushing up to this top position, not like this. And as much as possible, you want your knees to stay above the balls of your feet, hence the idea that you're sitting back. And it will obviously become much stronger in your legs. But try not to stiffen up in your knees, or your ankles, your hips. The body contracting, expanding, contracting. And then bring your hands around as though you're cradling a ball. And on the expansion, this time it's like a wave coming up underneath your hands, pushing you up, and then so you're just dropping down, pressing the ball down. Expanding and contracting. See if you can just let yourself slip into a nice steady rhythm. It comes from the movement in your legs and your hips. It's down and then up. So think of the hips, perhaps down and then up. Arms just governed by that movement. And what we may well find is that after a very short space of time, the hands are accelerating. So one of the things that I've learned to do over the years in Tai Chi is to actually just get into the habit of consistently returning my attention to feet, legs, hips. Feel that connection from hips up my back to my shoulders. To feel that as my shoulders move, my arms follow. And maybe, in the case of most of these exercises, actually creating a shape that follows the shoulders. And just to be aware that that habit of bringing your attention back actually has very real physical benefits, but also has this impact on our attention, on our minds, of just beginning to develop a sense of quietness and a sense of calmness, which is really one of the great benefits of the art. And as that develops, so there's less clutter in our attention, less distractions, less details that we're trying to deal with in our lives, and so on and so forth. And that improves our attention. That means that we see more clearly what is working and what is happening within this inner landscape of the body. And this time, bringing your hands out, wild goose. Step back so my fingers don't disappear. So a strong image here of a bird in flight, which may be a very evocative image to you. It is for me. But recognize that we're not trying to be a bird. We're not trying to imagine what it would like to be a bird. I'm not sure that we we could do that. But the qualities of a smoothness of movement, fluidity of movement, a strength of movement, and possibly even, with the sense of the bird in the sky and the openness, and the spaciousness that can convey. These are all qualities that we try and bring into the movement that we're doing. And whatever other qualities you feel are useful in association with that image. And then parting the clouds. And here, a slightly more abstract idea, perhaps. Not so much a physical image as a feeling. Yeah. Weather recently has been a bit mixed, hasn't it? We've had bouts of grey cloud, storm cloud, interspersed with these lovely blue skies, at least where I've been. And that feeling when the clouds part, there's a warmth there, quite noticeable at this time of year. There's an openness there, a spaciousness there. For me, these images don't work for you, then don't chase after them. They may not mean anything to you. It's okay. It's not a failure if you do that. They're not, the images are there to be useful to us, not as a goal in the practice. Now letting your hands drop down, and then dragon plucks the stars from the sky, pushing up, wrap your fingers around and draw down. And then on the other side, expanding and contracting. I'm going to come closer. I won't be able to get my hand as high, but I just want you to see what happens with the hand. The fingers curl around. This is hollow in between, and then I drop down, and that pulls my elbow down. That pulls the arm down. And the height is, I'm going to say optional. It goes up. How high you go depends on how it's comfortable for you. What you could do is push one hand up and then just rest there for a moment. Can you find a position where your arm is most comfortable? You don't want your hand behind your body. You don't want it too far forwards. You don't want the elbow out or anything like that. Is there the possibility of a place for your hand to be? And then coming straight down. And then on the other side, pushing up, just take a moment, play with this idea that there's a comfortable position for you. And then pulling down. And part of your intent is to move your hand into that position, certainly. But a part of your intent is to recognize that there is a position that your hand can move to where it is more comfortable. And it may not be exactly the same place each time, and it will certainly vary from exercise to exercise, and possibly even from side to side. One arm isn't necessarily going to be the same as the other. So at first, we're thinking, right, I've got to get the hand to this position. That's where it's most comfortable. But then after a while, we're more interested in our intent with the feeling of the arm when it's in position and the transition between that and this lower position. So intent becomes increasingly more subtle, or opens up into more subtle areas. And those more subtle areas don't replace the physical awareness. And one of the strongest intentions is to move in the way that we know that we can move in Tai Chi. Now changing, and just the first and the last part of pushing in 4 directions. And again, giving yourself a moment to find a position for your hands. Again, they're in front of your body, not behind. Exactly how high and what are your shoulders doing and so on. It doesn't go particularly high, this one, in any circumstance. And then coming down and then pushing out. And again, this is quite tricky because your hands are right out to the side. And yet, again, we want them in front of the body. We want to feel that the weight of our arms is hanging from our shoulders. We can't do that if the arms are like that. So our elbows are dropping down and then returning. And then more fluidly, but with that same quality of intent. This time, pushing out, turning in the center of your body without losing that quality or that awareness of where your hands end up in relation to your shoulders. And then pushing out to the sides. And again, 4 directions upwards. Next 3 directions are all pressing outwards, but the 2 middle directions are changed through the turning in the center of your body. Still the same posture, weight a little bit forwards, hips dropping back. Give you that ability to turn more smoothly in the middle of your body and gradually letting the attention that you bring to your body and the fundamental attention I was talking about with the feet, for instance, actually to really enlarge and include this central part of the body between hips and waist. Do one more round. And then letting your hands drop. And circling palms, this time again on one side, your arm swing it out to the side and just let that movement bring your hand up, really to a very similar position to the last exercise. And certainly with the same kind of quality. A bit more tricky, I always find this one. I find it stronger in the shoulder. But in some ways, it has a similar feel to Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky, with that expansive quality through one side. And then, if it's comfortable, once again, your attention here and you turn. What you may find is that when you do that, there's a kind of pulling, twisting feeling in your shoulder or your back, in which case, go nice and easy, or simply don't do the turn, simply leave that turning part of it. And then change the other side. There's a slight feeling of outward pressure through the heel of your palm sometimes in this one. And then add in the turn. Good. Now, letting your arms rest for a moment, going back to this movement, dropping of the center of gravity, and the rooting down actually releases some of the tightness around the center of the body. Sometimes we can think in terms of the physical center of the body, so the physical locations between hips and waist. Sometimes we can think of an idea of the center as almost a concept that includes our feet and our root and so on and so forth, whatever's most convenient. But the center part of the body, the turning, the rotating in the center part of the body, as we discovered, saying pushing in 4 directions, or even in this one, is what moves our arms for us. It will also move our legs for us. So it's the center of the movement. It's the guiding part of the body. And so we learn to focus our attention into this part of the body, and we learn to focus our intention to create patterns through this part of the body. If the exercise requires that one arm or both arms moves to the left, shall we say, then there will be some kind of action, some kind of rotation in the center of the body, visible or invisible, that moves to the left, moves the arm to the left. The next 2 exercises require our head and shoulders to go forwards. So what we're going to do is use this center part of the body as a vertical rotation. And so as you sink down this time, push your hips back, feel the pelvis tilting. It tilts forwards and then it tilts back, and then you push up. Remember earlier when I was talking about the basic posture, slightly angled forwards, the hips dropping back, we're able to bring our head and shoulders upright, and the same thing here. Now that's quite difficult to do. One of the very, very common habits we have is to stiffen up in shoulders and neck, back and belly, to really force ourselves into an upright position. And this is where an awareness of the sort of support that the internal skeleton can give us. And more than that, an awareness of the significance of the alignment with the pull of gravity and the rooting down, the dropping of the center of gravity can really help us. And then this time, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, your arms simply following the move. So it's very important that we take on board this aspect of the hips going back. When the hips go back, this is still a strong exercise, so you must be careful, but this is reasonably comfortable. If all I do is bend forwards, I'm very quickly becoming unstable, and you will stiffen up in your back if you do that. It's already an exercise that is strong in the back. So again, where we put our attention, how we focus our intention through the body to create movement becomes really important here. And then change into polishing the table. You turn horizontally, then you push the hips back, and you turn horizontally again, and you let the hips drop down and tuck under again. And change direction. So try not to think of this as a movement that is about pushing your hands forwards. Your hands go forwards because, quite simply, from this position, there's little else for them to do. If your hands were resting on a table and you pushed your hips back and your shoulders went forwards, if it, your hands would just slide across the table. Unless you had weight in, you don't want any weight in your hands. Polishing the table one more time. And then just stand. Shake out. Excellent. Those last two exercises, I think, demonstrate something for me, which is really one of the most lovely aspects of Tai Chi, which is that it really helps our ability to come upright, to have that sense of openness and that elevation that we associate with good posture, without the tightening, without the stiffening that we would often associate with that. It really is, one way you could think of this in purely physical terms. If I could show you this here, see this, if this is your spine, then you've got a weight on the end, which is the weight of your head. When you look at that, when your hips go back, the hips would be here, that goes forwards, and to bring that weight up again, what we want to do is to let that part drop rather than struggle and strain to pull up here. I know it's a leverage principle, it's a very short lever, but nevertheless it is a lever, which means that this sort of like ongoing lifelong struggle to keep our heads up, to pull ourselves up, actually ceases when we can do that. It's not trying to pretend it's easy, because as we're discovering, it's difficult on the legs and so on and so forth. But it isn't one that brings us into conflict with the pull of gravity. In fact, and this is very much how Tai Chi works as a martial art, we actually allow gravity to draw our hips down. We stop resisting that movement. And so the very force that might have pulled us over, say, is the one that actually helps us to become upright. And that just changes so much within the internal landscape of the body. It's not going to happen overnight, but much of the need for tightness and stiffness in our upper body actually dissolves away at that point. It's by no means the only reason. There's all sorts of factors in this. So it really is worth practicing this posture, because it doesn't happen without muscular conditioning in all sorts of ways, and then often in very subtle ways, and not just muscles either. So it doesn't happen overnight, but it really is a very important part of what we're doing. Changing the stance, keeping the width of your step so your hips feel as though they're supported. Turn your left foot out a little bit. That's an angle that you can play around with. It could be anything between about 45 degrees and maybe even as narrow as 10 degrees, depending on what suits you. With your other foot, you step straight forward, the toes point forwards. The length of the step is about the same, maybe a little longer than the width. And then just moving your weight forwards and backwards. So we want to try and maintain this upright stance, and hence, because of that, the significance of the center of the body, the hips dropping back, while we're in movement like this. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should never angle forwards, because actually in what I think of as everyday walking, one of the things that we will often do is we would lean slightly so that our center of gravity goes forwards. This helps to give us a sense of momentum, and we step through. And if you're running for the bus, you lean a bit further, and so on and so forth. Most of us will quite naturally do that. It's another way in which we can use gravity this time to help propel us forwards. However, there needs to be a counterbalance to that, because if all I do is lean forwards, then I'm going to fall over. So the counterbalance to that is the hips dropping back. And this is what we're playing with here. We're not trying to bring our upper body directly into the propulsion of the body, shall we say. It's all about using our legs and this gentle pressure downwards to push the body forwards. And we want to be very accurate. We want the weight to go properly into the front foot, just behind the ball of the foot, properly in the back foot, just behind the ball of the foot. So once again, there are qualities here of attentiveness, but also intention. And a lot of these ideas that I'm presenting, I don't walk down the road thinking I've got to put my foot here, I've got to put my weight there, and so on and so forth. So we develop these intentions in the practice to everyday habits, because you could argue that habits are intentional, they're not always positive, but there's an intent behind that. So I move my weight to here, my front leg. What I don't want to do is to move my weight sort of over here somewhere, because there's no leg there. Unless I'm thinking, all right, the bus is about to leave, I can run from the bus. Obviously, there are times when we would do that, but what I don't want to do is that the bus is about, oh, I've missed it, but I can't stop. And what will stop you, what will put the brakes on, is what we're doing in this exercise, which is using the legs and the awareness of the legs, and awareness of how gravity is working on our hips, drawing our center of gravity downwards. An outcome of this is stability. And I'm trying not to use the word balance. When we're rooted down, when we're in line with the pull of gravity, we can achieve stability. And it's only when we lose stability that we have to think about balancing. So bring your weight into the back foot, and then just raise your front toes. You can have the front foot turned out slightly now if you wish. Go forwards, push the back knee forwards, and just feel how your weight slips a little bit more into your supporting leg, and you're looking to be able to line yourself up over that leg. Root down through that leg and foot so that you're stable over one leg, and then just bring your foot in, push the foot out, place it down, plant it down, bring it back, bring the foot in. Try and avoid something like this. If you look at my hips here, you don't want to do this because now I'm off that way, and so on and so forth. It's not a big step, and it's deliberately not meant to be a big step, because it's simply a case of, how can I put it? Think of this leg expanding outwards. Think of this leg as contracting inwards and then expanding outwards. Expanding inwards. Sorry, contracting inwards, expanding outwards, rather than the feeling that I have to take a stride. As soon as I do that, and again, I'm not saying this is never a good thing to do, but you start to stride, you do that. I sometimes describe this as though you're walking on thin ice, testing the ice before you commit your weight. Then on the other side, so hip width across your feet, play around with this angle and transfer in your weight. I sometimes think of this exercise and the stepping as things that actually inform us about missing elements in our normal movement around. They're not the only factors. And yes, you know, kind of like it's quite good to stride out, to open the legs out, to build up a bit of speed and momentum. But somehow this feels like it's at the core of that. The other things are development out of this, and yet too often we don't have this central element, which is the one that will enable us to do that, but also give us a route back to stability when we need it. Raising toes and heel. So this exercise can have a very direct impact on just the way we move around, whether it be in the home or popping down the shops or whatever. Practicing this gradually builds our awareness of weight transfer. Remember, we're going to one leg and then into the other. It's actually a very precise action. It helps us to recognize the significance of the hips dropping back and that sort of softening around lower back, hips and buttocks, that says that we can let the center of gravity drop. It conditions our legs. It's very good for strengthening the legs in a way that helps to protect the joints of the legs, ankles, knees, hips, because they remain soft and they're not weight bearing. They're transmitting our weight. Our weight goes through our knee, through our ankle, into the ground, and so on. And then stepping in. And then just take a few steps forwards, keeping the width of your step so the foot comes in, swings out in a semicircle. And to find the length of the step, simply get that feeling of your foot, your leg expanding outwards, pushing the heel into the ground. And then going back on the other direction. Here it's the ball of the foot that touches the ground first. And again, try and avoid this, because now I've just got to put the foot down anywhere to stop myself, which of course you must do. You don't want to fall over. Good, and shake out. So useful exercise to do if you can do so safely on maybe uneven ground. And you know, you will get moments when you're there and it's like, oh, this doesn't feel good. If you can go from this to this, this my toes have gone down, which is fine. I'm quite comfortable with that. It's really the action that I want you to sort of be aware of, exaggerate, is from here to here. And that's a very practical thing, I think. I've had a number of people come back to me and say, sort of describe incidents that could have ended up very nastily indeed, could have ended up with them very much being in hospital because they'd fallen badly and so on and so forth, and yet have said that the rooting down, this very simple operation of dropping the hips, has actually kept them upright just for a few moments until they could sort themselves out. It doesn't have to look good in circumstances like that. It doesn't have to be fluid or have any fancy concepts. It's the difference between this and this. It's not about standing on one leg either. If the foot goes down to help you, well and good. The important thing in those circumstances is they were still upright at the end of the process. Nothing else trumps that so far as I'm concerned. So these movements right from the start here, getting into this, developing this as a habit, as a response to the gravity working through the body, as a response towards being uncomfortable, unstable, and so on and so forth, is really important. Now, have your right foot forwards again, and fisherman cast the net. So once again, there's a potential problem here, which is that our arms begin to take over the movement. Our arms attract our attention in a big way. So what can happen here is very easy, it becomes this. But if you look at what I'm doing, my weight goes forwards, my hips go forwards, I settle into this leg. My shoulders move because my hips move. And my shoulders pull on my elbows, elbows pull on wrists, wrists pull on fingers. Then my weight goes back. So once again, the rhythm, pace of the movement comes from an awareness of what's happening in feet and hips. In this instance, very much concerned with the transfer of our weight. With this exercise, we're facing forwards, and I won't go into detail about it. If you find that your body's slightly angled off in one direction, don't concern yourself with that. Overall, we're facing ahead, we're moving forwards and backwards. And the other thing to notice is that your arm is swinging in an arc, part of a circle. Now, don't do this, but if I wanted to, I could, for instance, just continue that arc over, and I could create, if not a true circle, certainly a circular movement. This is quite natural because our arms are attached at one end of the body and another. So what we're going to do now is the change is very simple. The change is here in the center of your body, not your shoulders or your chest or your back or your head. What you're going to do is you go back and you turn in the center of your body. You draw your hands across your body, letting them swing up, and then you go forwards, and your hands quite naturally drop down. They come over your right hip and swing up again and back. So we have this sort of horizontal figure of 8 or infinity sign. 2 circles interlocking. And it's the movement of your weight and the guidance from the center of your body. The center of your body will turn most naturally in the direction of the foot that it's moving towards. So you tend to look forwards when you're on the front foot. You tend to look in the direction the back foot is facing. There are variations on that, but this is keeping it very, very simple. You don't want your arms to go too far from your body. Remember that feeling when your arms are comfortable. Here, you should still be aware of the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. And here. And all the way through, of course, but particularly so you're not here, not doing this, straining in your shoulders, they're hanging down. Shake out. Left foot forward. So starting with fisherman castanet, I often start this part of the sessions with this exercise because it's so very, very straightforward, moving forwards and backwards, facing forwards, arms move forwards and backwards, and yet there's a great deal going on. Again, can you bring your attention to this inner landscape of your body? What's happening in your back, your belly, in your shoulder blades, in your chest, as the movement flows through your body? And which of those movements are useful? Some of them might be tight, others might be much more conducive to the movement. So we intend to make use of what is useful, to develop what is useful. And then we turn. Don't rush. You come into your back foot and you rest there for a moment. Feel the weight in your back leg, and only when the hands are in position do we move forwards. And slightly behind the arms as we wait. Now we move the weight back. Wait. Now we move the weight forwards. Now this time, I'm going to go forward, but if you want to go back, because it's more convenient, that's fine. Turning my foot out here. As I wait here, I think, well, I'll bring my foot in this way. And then I go forwards. So as my arms rise, my foot comes in, and then I take the step and I'm going. This time, so I'm running that space, I'm going to step back. It's the same thing here. Bringing my foot in, pushing back, drawing down. And then bring a few power. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder, arm. And the other side. Onto your back. Down your hips. Down your legs and up the inside. And light on your belly. And the upper part of the chest. Okay, so coming back to the basics stance and all of these qualities, as I think I used the term earlier in the session of an aspiration, they're lost all the time. We'd lose stability, we'd lose the root, we'd lose the calmness and the awareness, our attention, our intention, one wanders away. But as a meditational device, if you like to put it like that, our body and our movement, the movements of the exercises are incredibly useful ways of bringing our attention back. Gravity is always with us. Our bodies are always with us. So we always have that anchor, shall we say. So don't think of it as a mistake when you lose these qualities, but just recognize that we have a pathway back. And this last exercise, Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain, really demonstrates that. You sink down, you push up, aware of how your body is responding to the push up, and to pull on your arms and your shoulders, and just beginning to yield to that. There comes a point in the movement upwards, just like a ball being thrown up in to the air, where the pull of gravity is so strong that it is no longer worth fighting against it. But what we can do, we don't just let it, not like a ball, it could go anywhere. We know where what we're doing. We want our weight to go down into our feet, want the weight in the front part of the feet, hips dropping back until they're over the ankles and maybe a bit further back than that. That feeling of draining away in the body. All of these things are in all of the movements that we do. Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain shows us that as we lose those qualities, as we inevitably do, we can also get them back. So last time, and stand. Thank you very much, everybody.